Mic's unmuted. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you so much for joining us for today's event, Recompose, Critical Mediation Pop-Up Expo, and today, Material Encounters in a Post-Human World. Now, to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube, live from Fourth Space, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Here at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge, co-create daily activities, examine research questions and projects, materials, things in development across the university. We're also running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting. So anyone joining us via Zoom, if you have any comments or questions, pop those into the chat. Those of you here in the space, just follow along and we will get to see some amazing projects. And with that, it's my pleasure to pass it over to Master of Design candidate. Now, I'll introduce things for today. Maria, over to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria. Thank you for coming. We are happy to share what we have been working on for the past 3 months. Recompose. Embrace the belief that one person's trash is another person or designer's treasure, as an entry point for resilient and imaginative creative practices. For this exhibition, we focus on innovative propositions for social and eco-conscious ways to engage with the wasteful industry of packaging, fashion, and product design. Thank you again for being here and hope you enjoy. So let's start.
Hello, everyone. I'm Helia, as you all know. My research is called Rethinking Design with Mycelium. And so I chose Mycelium as a critical material to explore it. So you guys can take a look. I'm sure you guys had a chance to take a look as well. So what is mycelium? So like fungi, when they want to reproduce, they're going to reproduce with spores. These spores, they fly around in the environment with like different organisms, and then once they are on an ideal surface, they start to grow and create hyphae. And hyphae are these like little thread-like white lines, and mycelium is a binding material that connects them to create the structure of the mycelium that you see. So mycelium has been used forever for its nutritional and for also medicinal values, but recently they found that this material also has a lot of potential into design because it's a completely biodegradable material. So once it's used, like once you have an object made out of mycelium, and when you discard it, it just completely goes back to nature, and it helps the environment around it to grow, and helps other organisms to flourish. So this biomaterial can actually replace other non-degradable toxic materials like plastic for packaging and like object design. So I got introduced to mycelium about like 2 years ago when I saw like works of other Concordian students when they made the chair for like interior of a metro. And I decided to like explore it more. I did some research and I found that mycelium is very resilient, and it's very resilient, and also, let me see, like there are like a lot of things about mycelium. I'm just gonna take my time. It's very resilient, and also it's it has insulation properties, it's high fire resistance properties, and it's like, also it's a material that's grown rather than manufactured, so it also saves a lot on energy when like growing it. It also saves a lot on cost. So therefore, it has a lot of potential for like object design. And so for my process, to start, I'm going to tell you exactly how you can get to this point. You have to have your mycelium and your substrate. And your substrate could be anything. It could be like sawdust, it could be wood, it could be even flour. And when you get your mycelium, you mix it together, and you have your mycelium paste ready. So now you have to kind of shape it around the mold that you have. And you have to create a perfect environment and like humidity, air circulation, and it has to be dark. So for my first try, I had this whole batch, and I didn't know exactly what's the perfect environment for mycelium to grow. There was a lot of light and the temperature wasn't quite right, so my first batch just did not grow. So I had to remove them, and I created a little house that was kind of dark, and the temperature inside was about like 23 degrees. There was air circulation, and I made sure that I spray water inside on the mycelium like every day, but also you cover the mycelium so it would stay humid. And for my second batch, I had the perfect environment, and I created some objects, but there were a lot of molds. And obviously, there are other organisms that come in. And you can just like scoop the mold out. Like this is one of the pieces that has mold on it. You can scoop the mold out and spray it with hydrogen peroxide, but I didn't know exactly the amount that I could spray without killing the mycelium. Turns out it doesn't even kill the mycelium. So my second batch fully had molds. The whole interior of the little house had molds. So I was like, okay, we're gonna restart. So I got rid of those. You can put them in compost. It's very good because it helps the compost as well. And for the third round, I made another house, sprayed the whole interior with hydrogen peroxide, and then I created my batch. And this time, it finally started growing. This is from the third batch. That's kind of one of my favorites. It's like a little cup, I would say. And for the third batch, it started growing. I could see the mycelium, I could see the white texture, and kind of fluffy at the beginning. But the problem, okay, so now you have to remove the molds that you have, not the organism mold, the mold that you have. You have to remove it, and this is a part because I didn't want to use 3D print because I thought it's kind of against the whole philosophy of mycelium because it's like biodegradable, and like 3D print, it would make sense if you want to reproduce, but I'm like experimenting right now, so I wanted to use objects that were in my house. So I kind of used just a glass of water for this, and then I used like a glass cup, like a bowl-ish for this one, and then just containers that I had around my place. And so when you remove the mold, because it has to grow on the outer edge and the interior edge, a lot of my shapes broke down. So the third batch, half of them worked, including this one and this one. The other half failed. So it was time for the fourth round, and this time I made sure that I'm like using the same kind of materials for the molds, and kind of worked out till the point where you start to cook it. And at this point, it's like very like time sensitive because like I was hitting the deadline. And once you put it in the oven, which at this point when you cook your mycelium, it kind of puts it to sleep, and you don't have to like put it in a high temperature. So it's around like 50 degrees what we had, and it just like takes all the moisture and all the water out, kind of dries the mycelium and puts it to sleep alongside with the molds that it has. But what I didn't know, it was that it's gonna shrink considerably in size, and it's gonna become super fragile. So I had to like consider the thickness that I was using. But this was my fourth batch, and these are the results after the cooking. And so we see like we have this one, it's like super lightweight. They're not as strong as I want it to be, but this one is strong. And that's also another like characteristic and potential that mycelium has, the fact that it's lightweight, that it could be used for even green architecture. Yeah, you guys can take a look if you would like. You can ask questions.
If anyone has a question, they can raise their hand and we will bring a mic to you. Thank you.
Hi, do you have any plans for what you will be doing with this material after the project?
Yes, that's a great question. I don't think it's done, the experimentation. I really want to try it one more time to get the thickness right. So I would make like strong mycelium. So my plan is to like do another, like a fifth round to see if I can get the texture right. But I feel like what I want to do is to create more designs and get it more accessible to public, because I had this block of mycelium and I just was holding it, and I went to a gallery right after, and a lot of people thought that that was my purse, and they didn't know that it was like actual fungi. And so when I tried to explain it, a lot of people, it was like a very new concept to them. So I feel like my plan is that once I get all the ingredients and like all the process right, I would want to like be able to like show it to people and introduce mycelium to broader public, and yeah, get them interested for like maybe engineering students to actually use the material.
Any other questions?
Where do you think people can get mycelium? Like, where did you get your mycelium from?
So you can get mycelium from like farms. Where I got it was called Maison Champignon. I can give you the information, but you can also get it from other places. There's like some stores on Saint Denis, but I feel like what is very important about mycelium is that you could get your hand on mycelium, but and there's a lot of research and there's like YouTube videos of like how to actually grow your mycelium, but nobody really goes into depth of like what can go wrong and how you can like go around that. So that's why like it took me, I thought it was gonna be like pretty straightforward, but there were so many challenges. So I feel like one part of it is actually, yeah, like get your hands on mycelium and start like experimenting, but I feel like there should be better resources of like step by step and like how to avoid it and how to overcome like the most typical, like for example, like molds, and like how to like pay attention to the thickness that you're doing before cooking. So if you wanna get mycelium, I can send you some resources, and there are like a bunch of stores, but I feel like a research should be done as well at the same time, so you can like start growing, and hopefully it can become accessible to public as well.
Any other questions? Are we ready to move on to our next project?
Do a quick crit. Thank you. Thank you, Elia, for your project. It sounds like you master quite well all the process and stories around the material you're using. I have one question, since you highlighted that the decaying process of the mycelium kind of forces you to rethink about the objects we're using in everyday life. And I was wondering what did lead, first of all, the design of the different projects that you're showing here, because there's a lot of table, let's say, objects and objects that might actually interact with food. And we all know that mycelium love very much food. So I'm interested in, and so that's the first question about the use of it. How do you envision these products in the future? And the second one would be more addressed to the very organic design that's very far from what we know in design, very polished objects. How did you go through this type of shape?
Fun fact, I did actually eat it by mistake. I was eating an apple, it fell on it, and I just grabbed it and ate a bunch of mycelium, and I survived. So there's that. But I chose these pieces because since I'm like experimenting and I knew that they were gonna fail, I really wanted to use like very simple shapes that it would be like easier to like grow them. But I feel like the decaying part of mycelium is was kind of great, but also not great, because we want objects to be able to like degrade properly and just like go back to nature, but at the same time we don't want them to like decay in like a month or so, or like for molds to appear on them. But I feel like a very potential for like research for mycelium is to how delay the process of decaying but not completely stop it. And also I feel like the potential of mycelium, it could be a lot in furniture design, because those are the furniture that we just like, we keep buying and then we get bored or we change our aesthetic and we just like send them out. Like we see like a lot of chairs like with plastic. So like an organic shaped like mycelium chair could be a very good option where you can just like use it for a while, and once you like, you feel like, also it's gonna start decaying at the same time you change your mind, so like, you can just like put it outside and get a new shape. It could also be used for like lampshades. There's a lot of experiments happening with it, but there's also like, yeah, I think furniture design and mycelium have very good future together.
Wonderful, thank you, Helia.
Of course.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leia, and this is Maria.
Hello.
And our project is titled Waves of Discard. Waves of Discard is a study of the relentless waves of consumerism that mimics the sea's natural cycles. This artwork explores how our cultural fixation with the new burdens not just our society, but also the natural world. most painfully, the sea. Inspired by the fast-paced online trend cycles where the newest technology is wanted, celebrated, and swiftly forgotten. So for our project, the main themes that we decided to focus on were overconsumption, electronic waste, environmental degradation, and recontextualizing discarded items, such as old technologies, to show how they can remain beautiful and meaningful through creative reinterpretation.
Yeah, so I'll talk about more of our process for this project. Everything that you see that is displayed here today was either lent to us by the IMCA Lab or the Force Space, especially these old cables that are part of the exhibition. And we're really proud of something that we were able to achieve with basically trash, because you wouldn't think of using your old 20 to 30-year-old TV for an exhibition, but we were able to successfully merge new technology with old technology. And our exhibition is also interactive. So if you come up to here, you could put on headphones and listen to what we recorded as a siren's call, luring you in and prompting you to buy new things. And this was the main idea behind our project. So we have several models that played the role of mermaids or sirens, who are known to lure people to their deaths. But for our project, they're luring us in to the consumerism wave that we see on social media, that a lot of us follow and end up buying the newest, latest iPhone or the newest, latest headset. You can also turn on the TV here. I'll just do it now. Have to wait a bit, and here you see like the static of the TV. And basically our goal was to recreate like a scene of like a dumpster, because that's where most people would leave their old technology behind, and if it's not properly recycled, it can like really harm the environment, especially the sea and the oceans, the rivers, and all the waterways, because it's heavily toxic. The TVs themselves are discarded every day. The cables that were also part of our photo shoot were also like something that is discarded like on a daily basis, and no one would think of recycling it or trying to use it again or make it work. Same for the old DVD player. And for these old CDs that were actually given to us kindly during the library sale at Concordia. So nothing here is new. Everything is repurposed. Yeah, and Leia can finish up about the project.
Yeah, so for our project, we wanted to draw a parallel between the relentless cycles of ocean waves and the rapid turnover of digital trend cycles. Both Maria and I are in the computational arts program, so we pretty much study the internet. And especially in today's world, we felt that our project was very relevant to, on social media and the rise of platforms like TikTok, trend cycles have begun to turn over, increasingly faster and faster. And there are people who, not just limited to influencers, but there are people whose jobs is to study you as a consumer and how active you are online and find ways to kind of manipulate you and lure you in to get you to buy more and more and to get you to always want the newest thing. And so we wanted to use sirens as a metaphor because, like Maria mentioned, sirens famously lure sailors who are out at sea to their death with their song. So we wanted to hopefully get the viewers to see this as a metaphor for what social media is like and how people are always trying to get you to think that you need to buy the newest technology or the newest clothes, when in fact, old technology can still remain beautiful. And we had a lot of fun throughout the process of creating this. For me, I study in Montreal, but my family does live by the ocean in Florida. So when I'm not here, I go to Florida. And what I've learned from living there the past few years is that the ocean is like not only a place of community that brings people together, people go there with their families to spend time, but there's a lot of spiritual connections and meanings to seashells and to the ocean that is so powerful. And I'm not religious, but I still find it, very powerful to be in front of. And it almost feels unnatural that electronic waste and what we're doing to the environment is beginning to overpower the ocean. And yeah, it just doesn't feel natural. And for us, we had the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of artists too who are credited. And it just became a very fun process of filming, photography, styling, creative direction. We both took on a lot of different roles, and the scale of the project ended up being a lot bigger than we originally thought, but we learned a lot in the process. And yeah, like Maria said, we didn't buy anything for this project. Even the clothes that were used for the models, they brought themselves, and even when the models is wearing my clothes as well. So please interact, please enjoy, and let us know your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? You can raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you.
So I see that there's a lot of symbolism of like advertising in the things you captured on video. I just want to hear a bit of like, what do you think about this whole like consumerism that inspired you with the videos you shot, basically?
Yeah, I can talk about it. So I think as someone who's always on social media and who myself gets heavily inspired by everything that I'm shown, and I want to buy also the latest thing, what I noticed is most influencers will use the stylish approach, and basically they're like a glorified version of themselves where they're the most beautiful, the most successful with the new technology that they're trying to make you buy. So that's what we try to add to our videos. All of our models are gorgeous and they have professional hair and makeup done. And that's like basically what we used in our photo shoot, the same marketing tactics you would see on the internet to lure people in.
It's like the shiny pearl.
Yes.
It's like the shiny pearl.
Yes, totally.
But also going off of that, I felt like in the process of our project, we started realizing that we were leaning more into fashion and also kind of critiquing the trend cycles in the fashion industry. And especially because what I see on the internet, it feels like almost every week there is a new shirt you have to buy or a new top or something. And then the next week, it's all of a sudden not in style anymore. And so with our choices in this going into more of an editorial look, we try to be, more conscious of what we were saying in the clothes and the makeup and the styling, as well as, like Maria said, in our online culture today, even that representation has become like so important.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you for your project. First of all, because I know the project from the beginning, so it comes from, has done a long way. I feel like the narrative is quite strong. I don't recognize myself, well, what I feel personally in the installation, in all what you said. I think we lose a little bit track of all the ocean stuff. And what I feel more, and I feel that's super interesting in the installation, is this kind of tension between the characters that you're filming and the way they actually align within different technologies that have their own personal design. I think this is the most impactful, to me, of course, effect of the work. And so I was wondering, because there's many objects around that reflects what's in the video. We can see the veil here that works with the character that's here. And what I feel like is that everything looks obsolete. And what I feel like, influencers, are they already obsolete? To me, that's kind of the question that emerges from this installation, because it looks like, wow, this is so like old, but this is today and yesterday and tomorrow as well. So were you conscious of these comments that I'm having while you were actually building the installation?
Yeah, so something interesting that we noticed while doing this is everything that we have here, the technology spans about like 4 decades. Like this TV, for example, here is from the 90s. This one from the early 2000s, 2010s, early, and then we have the latest monitors you can like get today. So a bit like we realized that a message that our exhibition would like talk about is, while we're still here, this is gonna stay behind us like after we're gone. And it's not probably, most probably not gonna be recycled if we continue the way we consume today. So I feel like it still ties back to consumerism and the waves of consumerism that social media encourages us to follow.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next project.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Cecilia, and this is Mai. For our project, we did packaging from waste and biomaterials. So we saw that about 50% of waste in Canada was from plastic packaging. And so we were inspired to try and think about new ways to make this material that often goes to the trash and only has one life cycle. So these are kind of materials that we were inspired by. So this is for like fruits, Then we also have bubble wrap that we wanted to recreate. And then like mold and peanut packaging. So we used a bunch of different materials like bioplastics, paper pulp, and mycelium.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the gelatin first. We did a lot of experimentation, mainly with shape. So we started experimenting with trying to emulate the structure of bubble wrap. These are our tests. This one is the most successful version. This was the first. So we played around with the different, how much glycerin that we put into the solution, and also the different containers that we used. So this one, we figured that it came out to like solid, and it kind of has a honeycomb feeling. So it doesn't really provide much like protection for things to not get broken. And then these are the next that we did. They work better. They're actually the most squishy ones that we were able to make. But this was because it was in a cup that was very narrow, so the glycerin could hold onto the walls and create many layers of bubbles. And then we settled on a smaller container that could provide a little bit of both. And yeah, so I've never actually popped it, but I want to try now. Okay, yeah.
That's the sound.
Yeah. So yeah, this was air bubbles injected with a syringe, and I'd say the main challenge with this one was trying to get it to not dry super quick so that all of the bubbles could be put in. Yeah, and then these we experimented with. It was actually kind of an accident. We thought what would happen if we just frothed the gelatin, and it was unexpected, but it completely changed the way that the glycerin looked. So it got rid of this kind of, I would say it's unappealing, this color that's a little bit, you can tell that it has gelatin and fat in it, or not fat, but protein in it. So it turned it into like a pearly sheen, which is nice, and it's also very squishy. So with this, this gave us the solution to do the fruit wrap, because we had tried at first to do something that would fold and that would be more pliable. This was actually the first gelatin thing that we tried. It was made by like making a sheet of gelatin, then we squished it onto a railing, but it dried solid. So once we figured out that this could be kind of foamy, we were able to make this, which has more cushioning. Yeah. And then these were the first iterations. They ended up being kind of like solid nets, so it wouldn't work. Yeah.
So because we're doing packaging, we wanted to try and discover how we could protect fragile things like bottles of wine, as well as like candle holders or like shot glasses, a bunch of things like that. And so obviously, the bubble wrap and all this is like a layer of protection, but to go even further, we wanted to see how we could work with molds and how we could work just like with thinner layers. So we did some paper pulp and worked around like different ways to mold the glasses and the candle holders. So this is a bit of a thinner one, and then this one is a bit thicker. So two different techniques that we went with. And then we also wanted to try with mycelium. So this kind of shows the process, like what happens with mycelium. So this one's like currently kind of decaying because it is still living. It started molding, and so we didn't really want to put that into the oven. We kind of just felt like it was interesting to show the process and that you could bring it back to the soil, and that's kind of the whole point of this. So yeah, this is interesting. The shape that it created was perfect, like if you were to have two layers to kind of cover the bottle of wine. And then we also made kind of like a jewelry holder over here and a little paper box that you could like put it in with a cute little tag. Yeah, and so for the tags, we created an ink from cabbage. And so this was a fun little process that we had worked with in the past. We wanted to try it again and see how the color would work on the paper that we created. And so we created little tags to give it that personal touch that would make you, I guess, fall more in love with the material and grow more empathy with it. And yeah, we experimented with lids as well.
The final thing we'd like to talk about is the peanut packaging. So we did 3 different molds. This is the smallest one. It would be used to, I guess, protect smaller things. Then those, and then these bigger ones. We had expected it to be lighter and equally as light as peanut packaging, but obviously that's not the case because apart from mycelium, this also has a sawdust or wood, I guess. So it's not as light as mycelium, but I think it's still pretty relatively light. Yeah, it was. We activated it again by putting flour, and it grew pretty quickly. So yes, that's.
Yeah, feel free to touch, or you could smell, but we wouldn't recommend it. It smells pretty funky. But yeah, you could touch anything or play around. The ink too, you could play with. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, we have some here.
I just have a question about specifically the bioplastics. I think they turned out really awesome. The frothing one, like the ones you frothed, look really sick. Thank you. I was wanting to touch that. I was just wondering how much glycerin or gelatin, whatever you used, did you need to make this stuff? Just in terms of if we wanted to project towards a future where all packaging or most packaging is made from these kinds of materials. I'm just wondering would you need buckets and tons and truckfuls of this stuff, or is it a bit more feasible than that?
I mean, if this were to be scaled up, then definitely. We started with one recipe and then played with the proportions of the glycerin and the gelatin. But it was very confusing because sometimes it would work and it would also depend on the temperature. So, and also if you keep it stirring, water keeps on evaporating. So that's also a little bit hard to keep track of. But yeah, in the end, it ended up kind of be a guessing game a little bit. But yeah, I'd say for this, more glycerin was better. That one, actually, more glycerin was better for both because we wanted the squishiness, especially for that one because we wanted it to be kind of foamy. So yeah.
Okay, I think we have another question here.
From all the materials that you explored, which one do you think has the most potential for packaging to actually replace the toxic ones?
I think that they all kind of have different places. However, I think that the mycelium has such cool properties, like the way that you could just, I don't know, give it all sorts of big scales, smaller scales, and it always kind of works pretty similarly. Whereas the bioplastics, you always have to change the proportions like we were just talking about. So I feel like maybe mycelium, but of course it depends what you're packaging because it works well for molds, but then if there's no mold, then there's just peanut packaging and it's really fragile, then it might not work as well, then maybe the bioplastic. So I guess it really depends on that.
Personally, I'd say I really hope that the bubble wrap could be a thing. I was thinking if it were to be industrialized, how would the bubbles be injected? Because it was really tough having a tray, this big, and then having to go with the syringe, row for row for row. And then, I don't know, I visualized a machine that could have many pistons that inject, 4 at a time or something like that. And then they could perfect the temperature and then, I don't know. I think it could work. I think that's so satisfying.
Just one thing to add is that also the bioplastics, I think, it's hard to know exactly when it turns harder and when it's a bit more squishy. So it's a time-sensitive subject. And I mean, similar with the mycelium, but I think that it usually lasts a bit longer, precisely the same as you create it. So I think that that's another thing that would be important for that question.
Are there other questions?
I was wondering how much emphasis you guys placed on aesthetics in the creation process, or did everything just happen to look so cohesive by accident?
Kind of accidental. I mean, some stuff, obviously, yes, we did plan it, but it's more, I mean, the mycelium is just the raw material. Same thing with the paper. We really wanted it to be from waste. So everything that we found, it kind of just worked out to kind of match together. And because it was mainly neutral colors, I guess it just kind of worked out that way.
Are there other questions?
Thank you for your project. I'm interested by the methodology. Okay, we have bubble wrap. How do we make it with bioplastics? And I think that the way you worked is actually interesting because if we don't know it's bioplastic, then it's hard to guess. So I have two questions for you because you've been doing tons of packaging, and I personally consider that at some points of the packaging we're using today are useless, such as this one or like the one of the craziest. So the first question is there like at some point of the process that you were making a packaging and you were just thinking, okay, why are we doing this? This is useless.
Yeah, so actually, this was one of the first ones that we were talking about. And at some point, I just looked at mine. I was like, but like, why? Like, why is that even there? But like, it is. So we still wanted to experiment with it, but we obviously didn't want to stop there because of that exact reason. And I mean, just like every Amazon package that you get, that's like this gigantic box and it's filled with paper, it's filled with, peanut packaging, which is why we wanted to experiment with that as well. So all these filler things are mainly what inspired us, but definitely like another chunk would be reducing all of that as well. I think, yeah, there were points when we were like, especially for that one, like you said, but I also think that packaging exists because it gives people the sense that their products are protected. So if we're still using stuff like this and bubble wrap, I think it's either because there's a necessity or because like an actual necessity to protect things, or I don't know, people are still going to keep using packaging. So whether or not we try to convince them that this is useless, I think that's still going to be produced. So if it's still good, we might as well try and make it provide an alternative. There are other types of packaging that are better, like the molds. Maybe a mycelium mold would be better than wrapping it in many layers of bubble wrap, but yeah. Also, another thing about packaging, obviously, is the feeling of like unwrapping a gift, and it's kind of like fun, it's personal, which is also why we added this experiment with the ink and with the color and just wanting to make it a little bit nicer and adding like a little personal touch with the label. So obviously that's something to explore further, but I think that's an important aspect as well.
And I have a second question. Which is more related to the processes you use, because I feel like there's a lot of interesting things here. There's many things I'm wondering how you did it. And since biomaterials are built around the big open source community, have you ever envisioned in the future to share actually your experiments? How you did it, what are the different recipes you've used, different techniques. You talked about using syringes for this one. And I think there's something interesting for the community as actually. So did you think of sharing it in any form?
Not until now, but we will consider it.
Do it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving to our next presentation.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to my pop-up shop. Hi, everyone. I'm Phoebe. Nice to meet you all if you don't already know me. So welcome to my pop-up shop, Fallen Wood, through a camp lens. So I got super inspired by my partner's backyard. He built his home behind woods that's on Île Goyer. And basically we were exploring and I kind of got inspired by all the fallen wood. And I thought it was quite interesting. And a little bit about the island. It's a Goyer Island, was once a stopover for Native American trade and a refuge for colonists' livestock, which now today is a residential development. So the fashion industry is a critical juncture with serious environmental issues, which is where this idea of using wood and bioplastics as a form of exploration into fashion came about. So this little capsule collection brings a new perspective by using fallen wood and bioplastics made from sawdust. So this embraces a circular economy by using biodegradable materials, by using zero waste patterns, The project subverts the typical association of sustainability, artifice, and the future of fashion. So with this playful and ironic use of materials, including the rawness of nature and a camp aesthetic. So here are some of the little pieces that I created. Here is a little top. It might be a little uncomfortable, but it's the whole point, it's the whole aesthetic. So this would come on your back, and it would look like this. It would be really cute. I don't want to try it on because she's a little fragile. So this is all made from bioplastics, and all the sawdust that was used from the cut pieces that I kept and I put into the bioplastics to create more of a rigid texture, and I kind of wanted to play with creating these like sawdust sequins, trying to turn this idea of luxury fashion into something a little bit different and using unconventional materials such as wood, which is not something that you would typically think of using for fashion. Here, I also used some fishnet techniques that I created this little dress, low back dress with the little bioplastics. And this is all biodegradable, so you could leave this out. The metal pieces might have to be taken off, but you could basically leave this in the woods and she could just stay there until she degrades. And same thing here. So I made this like little bustier top, and if you can listen, it has a nice little sound to it. And I think this is really fun. It could be like a very avant-garde piece that someone would like to wear to an event. It might be a little uncomfortable, but it's the whole point. Fashion is not always comfortable, and we love that. Same thing. So this piece, basically, all the cutouts from this garment, I made a bustier. The shape of this did not look like this. So I sewed the pieces together, and we created this cute little top. And these are little, I love bows. So I made little bioplastic bows, and I came to attach them with the little metal rings. Yeah, they kind of shrunk. They were a little bit bigger, but the sawdust kind of like creates this like rigidness, and I didn't know that, but it looks perfect. And I'm really happy with this little piece that was nothing and then became something. And this is linen, a mix of linen and cotton, so it's all biodegradable. Same thing with the yarn that I used, it's all 100% cotton, so it could be biodegradable. This is just like a cute little necklace that you can put on if you'd like. And here is the main piece. So this, I mixed the wood and the bioplastics all together. I created this little top that could be worn as a dress, it could be worn as a little jacket, it could be worn however you'd like. So I'm gonna try it on for you guys. Comes off my beautiful lamp that I've made as well. And here you go, here you have it. This is their cute little piece.
Thank you. Wonderful. Do we have any questions? Raise your hands.
I'd love it if you could explain how you actually made those little bows, because from far away I could definitely clock that they were bows, and I was thinking, how the hell did she do that?
So the bows are actually a silicone mold that I purchased that is actually used for chocolate or for candy. And yeah, and I love that I found this. I love bows, so I was like, I need to put that with the wood. It kind of like has this like juxtaposition with the camp aesthetic, and with the wood, it like brings this like whole thing together. And yeah, that's. If anyone wants to try anything on, just be careful, but you guys can try. They're all a little fragile. But yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
What do you think was the most difficult part to work on? Not only, I know that sewing is such a difficult part, but like working with the material and everything, which piece do you think was the most difficult to create?
I think they're all a little bit different. I think that this piece, because of the molding of the bust, was quite difficult. It was kind of a weird process. I had to like put something on a pillow and like create a shape. But yeah, I think that this piece, because of the shape and putting all these little rings together, my hands at the end, like they're still kind of raw from all the playing and like opening up. But yeah, I think they're all different in different ways, and I think that they're all kind of have their own quirks and their own like difficulties. But yeah, I think that that piece overall, I think this one is the more time-consuming because you have to like lace each piece. I also had to cut all the pieces of the wood. I had to scavenge for the wood in the woods. And also bioplastics was a very long process. I made a lot of bioplastics, so that took some time. But yeah, overall, I'm very happy with the things. Yeah.
Yes, and another question over here.
I love the bioplastic, like the sequins. I think that's such a really lovely idea. I was just wondering, like, would you see yourself experimenting more with bioplastics to make like maybe a textile, or do you see kind of like a future for that in general, that people could be wearing like bioplastic materials? Just want to know what you think.
Yeah, so I think I kind of want to experience with the kombucha, trying to make leather. I think that's kind of something interesting because I do like funky fabric, and I think that making leather with bioplastics would be like really sick and really insane. Yeah, so I think I'd kind of maybe explore more with the bioplastics, maybe make it less hard, because I think there was a lot of experimentation with the bioplastics. I did other batches that were not what this was, and I feel like I could explore even more, maybe making it a little bit less. Yeah, you kind of, there's also, if you guys want, you can touch them, you can also smell them. It smells like pine oil. It has this rugged, nice little ambiance to like, even now I smell like pine oil. But yeah, no, I think experiencing more with the types of like how malleable it is, I think that's something I'd like to experience.
Other questions?
Well, well, thank you, Phoebe. It looks actually very professional, I think, this whole setup. And there's a lot of objects that are polished and well designed, and I really enjoyed the fact that they all communicate together. We understand that you did one, then the other one was prototype number 2, but then it's a piece in itself. So I think that's quite interesting. Also that you highlight all the very localized process that you've been through. It's interesting because you go in the wood and then you cut the wood and then you did it, and then you understand that the whole chain of production, of design is quite like requires lots of people and lots of places. And I feel like that's something we really feel. And I don't really have a question. I just feel like we all miss summer when we see the clothes that you've done. So maybe, you'll have to wait a couple of months before wearing that.
Maybe if Oshiaga is watching, maybe they could like influencers. This could be kind of fun.
Exactly. So maybe one question, because I remember at the beginning you were interested by dyeing and colors, and at the end you sticked with what the wood can propose. So did you ever envision to like dye some of these pieces that you have?
I think at the beginning when I started dyeing the bioplastics, and then I felt like the color didn't fit with this nature-inspired look. I felt like I do love camp and I love color, but I feel like for this specific little capsule collection, I felt like sticking with the color of the wood and the color of the bioplastics. And when I made these pieces and I saw how dark they became, I liked the contrast of these dark pieces and the light wood pieces. So I feel like for this, I kept it this way, but I think that I would love to experience more with the eco dyeing, which something that I already know, so I'd like to maybe experience more with that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So while we all wait for the warm weather that will be appropriate for these clothings, I think we're going to take a 15-minute break now. It's 3:00, and we will continue with the rest of the presentations at 3:15. Thank you, everyone. Okay, everyone, and we're back.
Beautiful. Hi, I'm Mac. My project is titled Materials of Protest, the textile storytelling in the textual space of social justice movements. This is a project that it's exploring fashion activism, especially in movements where civil unrest took place in public spaces. So I was interested in looking at research questions that centered around sustainable practices for protesting. So how we could shift away from cardboard and paper signs that last only one demonstration and create things that are more personal and long-lasting. I was very much inspired by the long history of protests and social movements here in Montreal. Just in my lifetime, I've gone through like 3 or 4 major movements, starting with the student strikes in 2012, and then the environmental protest of students more recently, and then now the uprise in pro-Palestinian demonstrations. And all of those movements have a piece of fabric or a piece of clothing that is associated to them. So we have the carré rouge, we have the red felt, the green felt circles, and now we have the keffiyeh like I'm wearing right now. And I'm interested in how those pieces of clothing or fabric really increase the visibility of those movements, and how things like the keffiyeh become entrenched in personal or individual identity when people appropriate them into their personal styles. And it sends a message even outside of protests. When people see me wearing this, they know where I stand, and it creates community bonds, conversation, etc. And so for this project specifically, I was looking at the Black Lives Matter movement in Montreal, so the 2020 marches, and this process was done in collaboration with community members. So I put out a call out on social media, and I asked for people who had also been present at the marches in 2020 in Montreal, who were interested in sharing their testimonies anonymously, to reach out to me. We had conversations, and I was interested in seeing the images that they remember. So I was really more interested in a visual landscape of those protests more than just the typical slogans that we would write on signs. And so we worked together sharing those stories, collecting images. I looked at a lot of graffiti and art that was made in that time period, because I consider that the art that was created in 2020 really served as the backdrop to that movement. And from those images, I created sketches, and I did some research into what would be symbolic materials for this movement specifically. So in my research, I was looking at the case of Trayvon Martin, who was a teenage boy who was shot and killed by police in 2012. And one of the reasons cited for his murder was that he was wearing a hoodie and that his face and hands were obscured, so the police was unsure if he was carrying a gun. Turns out he was only buying candy at the drugstore, but the hoodie kind of became a material witness to his murder and was repurposed many times by the community for marches. For example, in 2013, there was the Million Hoodie March on Washington, D.C. And in general, the hoodie just became a piece of clothing with a very negative connotation. Even me, my parents and grandparents have told me, don't put your hood up if you're going outside, and it's something that comes up often in the literature. And in protest, often people will be blocked up, so they will be masked, they will be covering their identities, and the hoodie, obscuring faces, etc., becomes a useful piece of clothing in that sense as well. So that's why I decided to work on hoodies. So I wanted to work only with recycled materials, scraps that I already had, and thrifted materials. So I thrifted hoodies that I felt I would keep after this project. So these are all things that are going to go into my personal collection. And so from the testimonies that I received, I created some sketches that became the embroidery that you see, or the appliques that you see on the hoodies. I wanted to include some words still so that people who don't recognize the scenes that I've appliqued on these hoodies can kind of understand what they are. I am not a seamstress, so all of my words are not super legible. So here we have more details on what is written. So the hoodies work in pairs. These first two, they spell out, who do I call when the police is murdering me? And then the last two spell out, no justice, no peace, which was a chant that the protesters in 2020 would reprise very often. Some of the appliques that you see, they're taken from, like I said, some of the art I was looking at. So a lot of motifs from BLM graffiti made their way onto the hoodies. And this was a very long and very slow process, but by the end of the project, I came to embrace this as part of the methodology. So I think or maybe the biggest part when it comes to materiality for my project is this closeness that you develop when you're spending hours and hours stitching onto something that you're going to wear, not just for one protest, but probably for the rest of your life. Like I said, these are going to become my hoodies. And I think this is just the beginning of a process that I would like to implement in my protester and activist circles. There is a practice called the stitch and bitch that I think is very interesting, where a bunch of people sit together and they chit chat and they stitch. And this is what I did with some of my community members. And so it did distract us, and it took us multiple days to finish just 4 hoodies, but it brought us closer both to the materials that we were using. The lettering that you see is all made from African wax prints, which is a material that comes from Africa, but that is being reclaimed by African Americans and African Canadians. And in my case, it was gifted to me by my grandparents. And so we were thinking of how to like le mettre en valeur, make it highlighted on these hoodies. And so we were talking about the materials, and we were talking and thinking about the cause for which we were making these hoodies. So it was like a twofold or two-pronged process that brought us closer to all of the themes in this project. And yeah, I think this is just the first iteration. I'm excited to make more, to make them more legible and hopefully more useful for protest purposes. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Mac, would you mind just taking a few off of the, just
Yes,
so we
for
can
sure.
see
Yeah.
for the camera?
I didn't show you all of them. So this is the first one. Some of the scenes you see are people marching, people holding up signs. This is the one that says, "Who do I call?" And has a little BLM graffiti. And then we have this one that continues the phrase, "The police are murdering me." We have more people marching. Then on this one, a scene that came back a lot in the testimonies was the people kneeling. So during the protest, people would take a minute of silence and kneel on the streets, especially after the murder of George Floyd. This one says "No justice" and also has the Black Power fist on it. And the last one says "No peace." And another one that came up a lot in graffiti was the lungs, because George Floyd famously said, "I can't breathe." And so there's a lot of lung-related art. And then people were also making signs impromptu in the streets. So that's why we have people crouching over here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
I have 2 little questions. The first one is it by design that there's no imprint, not imprint, but like stitching on the back? Because I remember at some point, I think you mentioned that, like, if I remember, like different sweatshirts, like hoodie, could have like things like connecting with each other or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question would be, are your hoodies like sustainable? Like, because I see like the Nike and I see like actual brands. So I was wondering if you actually got them at the Renaissance or something.
Yes. First question, excellent question. So I did have at first the idea of having designs that wrapped around the body, but then something I didn't mention is, this idea of the crowd becoming a quilt of people wearing these hoodies. And so I prioritized having designs that went from hoodie to hoodie. If the words were going around, I didn't know how legible it would be that the phrase was continuing across multiple people. So I did only the front, so that if you're sitting next to someone, the slogan continues. And then, yes, all of these come from the Salvation Army, except for one that I already owned. And I did purposely pick some that had writing or that had branding, because my idea is to showcase that it's something made from whatever you already have. So if you have a Nike hoodie, you can sacrifice your Nike hoodie and you can put some appliques on it, and it's fine. Thank you.
Other questions?
You mentioned that you didn't have experience before this project sewing, but I was wondering if there's anything like you learned through clothing design that you're going to take with you in the future in your own design like processes.
Yeah, so through my master's, I'm working on graphic design and like, layouts for print media. And this actually taught me a lot, because when I finished blocking this out and I sold it all, I cut out my appliques and I'm like, this is not legible at all. Like, it's almost like I forget that people read from left to right, and I did things really weirdly. So I'm probably not going to do another textile project anytime soon, but it did teach me about like planning things out and legibility in general. When you're making things for the public space, you have to test it out and you have to show other people, because you get in a bubble and then you think it's really clear. And then I showed other people and they couldn't read what I was trying to communicate.
Other questions?
So quick question. First off, congrats, because they look fantastic. I think one question that immediately jumps is, was it all hand stitched or was it machine?
It was all hand stitched.
Hand stitched. Great job, seriously, because it's not as easy as it looks. Another thing, I think visually, it's really interesting to see that you've adapted well-recognized brands like Nike, like Jordan, like Gap, which already have social consciousness and people identify them. And I think there is something really powerful in the ability that many units can go either unnoticed from the back or sort of in uniform on the back. And in the front, there is things that maybe some people will identify, oh, I recognize that pattern, or I recognize that slogan. Yeah, and I think also I really appreciate the idea that you would want to take what you're trying to say or express in the streets politically and practice it on a daily basis of wearing an article of clothing. And I think, because yeah, I remember like a few years back during the climate march, the really huge one that went over in Montreal. I remember walking down the street later that day, and I noticed in the street there was a sign that said, "We love our mother," like completely demolished on the street. And I was like, that's terrible. That's literally not the point. So it's interesting that you've been able to use like things that already resonate in public consciousness, like logos. Like I'm noticing now, is the full is that the Tim Hortons logo?
Yes.
Amazing. See? So yeah, there's like levels in which the eye engages with it. And I think also the stitching, I like the ambiguity of it because you're able to kind of, in passing eye, they wouldn't necessarily resonate as as pointed as protest signs are typically. And sometimes it's unsafe to be fully vigilant in public. So yeah, it's nice to have the space to have an ambiguous figure or slogans that kind of fall down the body or around the body in a, yeah, it's interesting as well that you're able to still put your hood up. I wonder if maybe there's something that could happen with like a hidden slogan on the hood that is away when it's down, and when it's up, it's activated, things like that. So yeah, I think bravo, congrats.
Those are some really good ideas for continuing.
And
Thank you.
you should read about craftivism.
Oh, I will.
It's literally the stitch and bitch, but like angrier and like
I like
craftivism. Yeah, like stitch and bitch gangs, but like in the street, knitting over public architecture, or like yeah, all doing like large hand embroidery work or things like that. So it could be another way where the old way of gathering up for a rally is you get with your friends and you make a sign and you all go together. And I think if that extends into something where you're actually repurposing an article of clothing that you already own with public consciousness in mind and extending that beyond just the street, I think it's really powerful. So congrats.
Thank you.
Well, you said it all, so. Well, thank you very much, Mac. I think it's a very interesting project. Also, the way you engage with your topic and that you're already in it. I find something interesting when you say that you're from graphic design, because there's something that's a lot related to street art, graffiti, and we all know that people from graphic design, they don't like these people. They're always like, they're doing like, lettering on the walls and blah, blah. And I think that's an interesting way to merge these together. Also, I really appreciate the fact that you're using hoodies that already have a brand on top of it, because it really looks like the wall becomes the hoodie and that the graffiti comes on top of, because that's the rule of the graffiti. You go and work on top of the public space, you go and work on top of the signs that are already invading public spaces. So I feel like there's something interesting. So my question is, because there's a question popping up in my mind now, like the way you addressed and aestheticized each one of the hoodies, were you actually playing with the logo the way it was there? Okay,
Yeah, I like pinned everything before, and I didn't want to just leave the logo empty space and then I like purposely pinned everything on top of the logos, both for like texture purposes and also to obscure it. Like, the logo is no longer what's important. There's this superposition of this is what I want you to look at, and it's on top of what was there before.
It works actually well. Like the one with the NBA character almost looks like it's part of the picture in a way. The way you did the illustration, so I think it works super well. Another question that I have is that this hoodie is interesting for protest, but it's also dangerous for the protesters themselves because we know the police is not always very compliant and they want to identify. So, this could also be like, so maybe there's a practice where you actually remove the hoodie at the end of the protest so that you make sure that no one's gonna recognize you. Because, there's a little bit of this thing in, the anonymous mask or something, true. Or scratch, or like.
Max just said reversible as well.
Reversible.
I did think about that when I was mentioning my other examples. Like everyone in Kefia's is very anonymous. Everyone has the same thing. These personalized hoodies definitely put kind of a target on your back. I think it's a conscious choice if you decide to identify yourself this way, but it could become like everybody hoodies off at the end of the protest or something. Yeah.
Or scratch.
Scratch off, yeah. True. Yeah, it can become a banner.
Yeah, and once again, I feel like Kara Walker is a wonderful inspiration in this work. It's I really feel, well, I felt it before, so I know
it was very inspiring. I spent a lot of time with her work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so we'll move on to our next presentation.
Hello, I'm Radhika, and my project is called The Exploration of the Potential of Bioplastics. So my project started out as just like curiosity about bioplastics, because like I've heard of them prior to the class, but I never really like looked into them or did anything like related to them. So I kind of wanted to like explore them through my project. It started out as being my idea. My initial idea was to do illustrations, so it's mostly like speculative design. But throughout like the journey, my ideas changed, and it became more of like a video and an animation. So I'll talk about that a bit more in detail like later. But basically, the purpose of this is to find ways to integrate bioplastics into already existing food packagings in order to reduce waste, but also in a way make them appealing to the public and keep them hygienic. So I started off the project by making my own bioplastics so I could get a better idea of like the process of the making and like the complexity of making them, and also to get an idea of the, like durability and storage. So after that, I decided that I wanted to make illustrations of bioplastics, of food packaging made of bioplastics. But while I was doing my illustrations, I went through different iterations of like different illustration styles I could use. But throughout my process, I realized that a lot of them were focusing more on the food in the packaging rather than the packaging itself. So I wanted to find a way to kind of make it kind of put more emphasis on the packaging itself rather than on the food. So I decided to go with a simpler illustration, which is more like flat design, and put more emphasis on the packaging rather than on the food. And I thought it'd be a good way to put them forward would be with animations and explaining them. I didn't have that much experience with animation prior to this, so it did take a little while for me to kind of adapt the drawings into animations. Yeah. So the video itself basically is just like there's like 5 different types of packagings in the video, and it talks about the first part talks about like kind of like the bad parts that could be like swapped or changed with bioplastics, and then it kind of goes into this part that talks about like ways the bioplastic could be used on a specific food. And at the end, there's like final like stats that talk about the bioplastics, like its durability, hygiene, and effectiveness. So it's kind of just like a little like, just little notes to kind of guide the viewer. I didn't want to put too much into like, I didn't want to put too much context outside of the video because I kind of wanted people to just walk in and like look at it and try to see like what it's about and kind of figure it out by themselves. So I kept it very like minimal. Yeah. So their ratings at the end that you see, there's durability, hygiene, and effectiveness. So the durability is mainly based on how long the bioplastic would last, like in an environment, like in a grocery store or something. And then the effectiveness is how useful it is in the packaging. So like in terms of like cost and production, how actually like effective making it would be. And hygiene is mainly based on whether or not the bioplastic is in direct contact with the food or not, and like how that could affect it, because we all know like once it comes in contact with some exterior organisms, it can get mold. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I just wanted the video to be mostly self-explanatory and just have kind of people walk in and look at it a bit and move on, and yeah. So that's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I remember when you presented your midterm prototypes, you had made actual bioplastics, sorry. Did you make more tests for the things that you're suggesting in your concepts?
Yeah, actually, I had made another version after, and I had, because the first batch, I had just made them like a bit, I followed like a recipe I found online. And then for the second batch, I had tested like different variations of the recipe to see like the different type of elasticity you can get with them. And I also stored them differently. So I had one refrigerated and one outside. And yeah, obviously the one outside got mold on it faster. So yeah, I was kind of just testing ways to store it in different temperatures too. So that could give a more accurate rating at the end, yeah.
I have a question. What was your process to putting together the animations?
Yeah, so yeah, like I said, I didn't have that much experience with the animations. So from like, I started out with like the simple, very simple drawings, and I had to kind of like cut them all up in a way that I could put them back together in an animation format. So basically, yeah, started out as drawings, cut them all up, put them in After Effects to animate them, and this is what I got with. I had to do a lot of research in terms of like how to animate them like technically, since I didn't have that much experience with it, but it was a fun learning experience. Yeah.
Other questions?
Thank you, Radhika. I have two questions for you. The first one, because most of the products that we see here looks like it comes from like Japanese food and Korean food, and we know that they tend to over package stuff,
Yeah.
right? So did you make like a set of explorations through this packaging? Why did you pick them up especially?
Yeah, exactly. It was, I forgot to mention it, thank you. Thank you for mentioning it. But yeah, it was mostly inspired by convenience store food, actually, the packagings I explored. Because, yeah, like you said, a lot of them are like overpackaged. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to take more into, and since they're like so quick and easy to grab, I feel like a lot of people just like get them but don't really realize that like it produces like that much waste. So yeah, that's why it's mainly turnaround convenience food. Yeah.
And the second question, because now that we have the video and that we're an exhibition space, what would be the best place for it? Yeah, to be shared, to be disseminated. I think you understood what I meant. I'm not gonna repeat this word ever. I'm done.
I feel like it could be like a cool little video to be in like some grocery stores have like TVs with like ads and stuff. So I feel like it could be cool to display it there just to create a little bit of like, hey, by the way, this is what's happening with your food or packaging that you're getting. So yeah, I feel like it could be cool to have it there since it's also really like a short little clips. It's not like you don't have to really stand there and stay there for too long. Like you could just see it while you're grabbing something. So yeah.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to our final project.
Oh, she has a clip. What do we do?
Well, hello everybody. My name is Maria. Well, for this project, it's pretty dear to me because I choose to work with bioplastic to honor one of my traditions. I'm from Colombia, and this was the perfect time because it's holidays, and every December we have this tradition called El Día de las Velitas, or Little Candles Day. It's such a pretty tradition, just to give you more context about it, because it reunites family that you haven't seen in such a long time, friends, people turn on lanterns, and it's super pretty because you enjoy a really good time together. And this tradition started as a religious one, but it later evolved as a more familiar one to respect the holidays. And well, today we are almost there for December 7th. So I wanted to honor the tradition doing my own faroles. So I will want to explain a little bit about the process. And when you guys start like checking my setup, you can even touch and see the prototypes. So this project started with bio inks. I try to create my own inks using different kind of fruits. If you want, you can draw there because I put them, so it's like super similar to watercolors. And there, well, I put 3 kind of inks. 2 of them are made with beads. Another one is made with cabbages. But something pretty interesting is how the fruits evolve when you change it with different chemicals. For example, the spice of being 2 similar beets, one of them is made with vinegar, and the other one, it was mixed with salt. So the color is more rich. And with the cabbages, I mix the cabbages with baking soda. So at the end, it was more like a greenish kind of tone. That later, with those, I start working with my bioplastic. So let's talk a little bit about the bioplastic process. This was a really challenging process because the bioplastic tends to wrap, bend. It can be a little bit fragile to work on. So yeah, it smells like a little bit of mint with like the fruit. So it was pretty interesting. As I started working on, I started experimenting and making my own kind of bioplastic cuisine because I got different recipes. If you see the table, you will see like different kind of prototypes. So for example, I started mixing 45 grams of gelatin with 1 gram of glycerin, and this thing happened. The bioplastic was really brittle, so it was difficult to work on and to cut. But in this case, when I tried to mix it with, I was like, okay, I will try to keep more glycerin on it and make it even like thicker. It was difficult to cut. And you might think, okay, how do you did those cut and why is a flower? So as I'm saying, like I'm building everything using my Colombian traditions. The flower is called the cayena, and it's a symbol of my city that is called Barranquilla. Well, I create the flower using a silhouette or pre-cut machine. It's the one that you made stickers with. So it's a really powerful machine to cut the bioplastic. And the challenging part was trying to figure out the best way or the best texture for the bioplastic to be, so the machine could cut it like precisely without any kind of problems. Another interesting part of the process that I discovered was, as I was working on it and the machine was making a few mistakes, I started getting a lot of bioplastic wasted. I'm quoting wasted because at the end I reshape it, because that's the magic of bioplastic, and all the materials that I have been seeing here in this exhibit is that we have the power to reshape it and work with them, and that's the beauty of the biomaterials. Because if you see those mini lanterns there, all of them are created with the bioplastic that I lost when the machine cut or create like wrong kind of cuts in between. So I put them again in a pot, put it like on the heat, and well, as the bioplastic was heating, I put more glycerin and create those mini lanterns. And the process of the mini lanterns, if you see on the table, is pretty interesting. And I put it there like as a little circle, because you will see like the first one there is the most recent one. But as you saw in a few other projects, the bioplastic tends to like reduce. So that last lantern is just one that have almost 2 weeks old. Another thing is bioplastic is biodegradable, so it can grow mold. But at the end, that's something really interesting to see, because these lanterns, like, they are not gonna be a waste. Like at the end of this project, what I was thinking of was breaking off the lantern after the December 7th, because I'm displaying this in my balcony. And after that, I will reshape them and make more lanterns and give it to friends. So that's a really nice idea to have and see like how the bioplastic is, can make a lot of wonders. Okay, so the last thing. Another thing that I noticed here was how, despite of working with silicone molds, how if you don't take care of like for how long the bioplastic is there set it up, you can break it easily. So it's something that it needs to be super, like, it needs to be careful to do that. And if you might ask like how I'm doing the supports, I 3D printed. Well, I get some help to 3D print it. And it's made with plant and starch. Cornstarch, thank you, cornstarch. So at the same time, it's like we are still working with these materials. And yes, I think that's everything for me now. And just to finalize, oops, sorry, where it is. Thank you. This is one of the pieces that I didn't put together because I just wanted to show you how the bioplastic can be translucent, but if you mix it like with a lot of bioplastic and a lot of ink, the color can be darker. So everything depends of the amount of it. So I thought that this was pretty interesting as a prototype because I built a lot of recipes doing all these projects. And yes, that's everything from me. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Great job, obviously.
Thank you.
So my question is, what are you doing to avoid mold? Because when I was drawing, I was scared to put the brush to different inks because like contaminating them.
Yeah.
So is there something that you're doing, or you're just going with the natural flow?
Okay, that's a good question. I got essential oils and one called winter clove that I dropped a few of them in the essential oil in the ink. So if you smell part of the ink, it will smell like a mint eucalyptus. So that helped me to preserve the ink. For example, that ink has almost 3 weeks, and and the beads no, wait. The cabbages were were outside my freezer for 4 days, so it didn't have any mold. But something interesting that I was looking at, and now that you're mentioning like the mold, I think like as the bioplastic gets more concentration of it in just one product, it start growing mold because of the heat and the humidity. So for example, a lot of these faroles, like let's say this one there has 3 weeks and it never grew mold. But I noticed my little lanterns, a few of them had mold after just 4 or 5 days. So I'm still figuring out why, because it have the same recipe, same part of the eucalyptus, or everything is the same, but I still not sure like why is this happening or what kind of conditions it has.
Again, a quick question. Does it dry or does it stay soft? Like
Are you talking about the lanterns or the faroles?
the lanterns?
Yes, the lanterns tend to dry. For example, the one that you see there, like the little flat one, that one has almost 2 weeks old, and I put it between like books, so it was this flat. Another one I never put it in books and took like it started wrapping. For the bioplastic as well, this is like the final kind of yeah, exactly. So another thing that I noticed, and I didn't say this when I was in the presentation, that prototype over there, the last prototype, like show how fragile this could be. That, as I say before, this was to honor a tradition, and it's more like as a decorative piece that you can have, but it's super fragile. So I was showing this, so if depending on the amount of glycerin, it gets even more fragile. So if less glycerin, more fragile it is. So that's why I just stick with 3 grams or 4, and a few of them like resist a lot. For example, the one in that is there resist a lot, but the other ones that we had like 2 grams, not that much.
This one you said.
Yes, that one is pretty resistant.
And there's different levels of transparency.
Levels
of transparency.
There is a different level. As you get more glycerin, it's more transparent. But other thing that I noticed is the bioplastic can change depending on the chemical substance. For example, the one that you have behind, that one is made with beets, and the color is pretty rich, but it's because the beets were mixed with vinegar. But this one that you have here, it doesn't have any vinegar. So it changed as well the composition at the end.
Interesting.
And yeah, they have the same amount of glycerin, but the vinegar makes it different. Same with the green ones. I noticed with the green ones, they tend to wrap or be more fragile because I mix it with baking soda. So the baking soda combined with the glycerin have another kind of chemical thing going on there. So it's pretty interesting to see.
Other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, I think it's what's interesting in your project. Thank you for a project, by the way, is all the things you can do with the beetroot, in a way, and all the experiments you can do with it. So you can draw, you can dye things, you can also make these bioplastic objects. I have a question because earlier you said that one of the problem you had was the fragility, it's brittle and everything. And on the other end, you said, okay, there might be mold as well. Mm-hmm. What is the greatest problem between these two?
Between fragility and mold? Mm-hmm. Okay, I have to make here. At the beginning, and this took me 3 days ago, if you asked me this question, I would say mold. Because, but I have an explanation. I know you. Because I was really worried about how mold can be something, because we think as mold are or fungus like something, or fungi like something really bad, right? And I was really, I don't know, worried about this. But later on, when we discussed, I don't know, I overthink and I was wrong. And I think like the mold gives something pretty important to understand, like this is a biomaterial that is biodegradable and have an age. So in these cases, if you ask me today, I will answer the fragility, because at the end, I want them to last and see how they evolve, and yeah, and see how they evolve and how they perish at the end. But just because it's natural, not because that happened, you know, like they will just broke because of my clumsiness. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Is any other questions or comments? No. Okay, great. All right, everyone. I think that brings us to the end of our day. Thank you so much to everyone who presented. Thank you for coming into ForSpace and activating this wonderful exhibit. We have more in store for you tomorrow, but all of those of you online and anyone who has tuned in, just so you know, we're going to be closing up this Zoom and live stream now, but a quick reminder that these wonderful presentations are already available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to revisit or share them. So thank you, everyone. Congrats to our first cohort, and join us again tomorrow for more critical materialities. Thank you, everybody.